Okay, so I had a client one time. His parents brought him to come and see me. He was a young man, and his parents were at their wits' end because he was very, very academic, very bright, very, very bright young man, really cognitively bright, and really pleasant personality. And he was doing really well at university, and I think at the time, this is so long ago now, he went from doing his degree to his master's, and at that point there he was doing some part-time work, and he literally just overnight sort of jacked it all in. And his parents were really concerned because what had happened, he went from being this sort of articulate, bright young man and working and conscientious and so on and so forth to, you know what, literally deciding I'm going to do away with all of that. And his parents had tried a number of different sources to see what was going on. And the reason I know that is because when they phoned up to see me, I suggested straight away, have you been to see a GP, anything wrong, or any organic disorder you might have, or maybe depression or anything like that, a mood disorder, so on and so forth. And they'd been through like the rounds, and I don't think anything flagged up at that point. I don't think so. I don't think he had any diagnosis for, he certainly at that point, I'm pretty sure he had he wasn't diagnosed with no organic disorder, but I'm pretty sure he didn't have any issues, or he didn't have any mood disorder like depression. But the point being is sort of, he decides literally, you know what, this is it. And now out of wits' end what they could do. And I sort of saw him for the first time, and when he first come along, his parents come along, I started talking to him and I thought, he's such a bright lad, really, really bright lad. It's quite strange what happened. And I dug a little bit deeper, as you do. And he sort of starts telling me, generally speaking, about the world. And he sort of got caught up in these sort of conspiracy theories, so on and so forth. And he sort of, went on Google and YouTube, and as you do, and he sort of, it became nihilistic in one sense. Nihilistic in the sense that, you know what, why even bother? What's the point of it all? And that's where he got to in his life. It became really, really nihilistic, and he wanted the world to burn, so to speak, in terms of, okay, what's the point? Why bother? All the injustices in the world. And it kind of sort of, nothing meant anything. Nothing was a means to an end. And I think nihilism is not a good place to be. It really isn't. I think if you get to a point in your life where nothing means anything, I think I wouldn't say positive, but the payoff is you just alleviate yourself of any responsibility, because all of a sudden you don't need to do or worry about finishing the masters or getting a job or following this course, because you got him in a situation where basically he's getting up in the morning, getting on the PlayStation, he's got his nachos out of the fridge and his bottle of Coca-Cola, so to speak, and that was it. And that's where he was, and there was no breaking out of that. And he became really nihilistic. And I asked him one time, and I was curious, I said, what are some of these conspiracy theories that sort of set it all off and seem to have triggered something off in him? And he told me some of them, and I was more intrigued, if nothing else at that point. What do you know that I should know, so to speak? Is anything I should know is going to happen? Is the world going to end, or what's going to happen? And he's like, nothing that probably none of us haven't heard before. And I sort of told him some of these sort of conspiracies have been around since the dawn of peoplekind or mankind, whatever you want to call it. Things don't repeat, but they rhyme. Whether they are real or not, really, is another fact altogether. And for me, some of the things he told me about, they're probably like, you couldn't even class them as conspiracies because they're out there for the public domain anyway. But the point being, my goal was to sort of, or at least the goal was for the parents to help them to go to a more adaptive state. And I'm kind of racking my head, thinking, okay, where and what's going on here, and looking at all the sort of pieces. And I sort of look at this model and so on and so forth and think, okay, this lad has become really nihilistic. But I sort of got to a point, to sort of cut a long story short, and I'll sort of link it in. I got to a point where I thought, this lad here, when we talk about the environmental factors that sort of have an effect on behaviour, he was in an environment where literally his mum would run him a damn bath in the evening, and his dad would cook him breakfast before he went to work, and so on and so forth. So I thought, okay, that might have something to do with it. So we talk about indirect communication. I was trying to indirectly say to the parents, well, maybe, but I wasn't getting anywhere, and it wasn't registering. That's sort of in a roundabout way, trying to say, well, maybe you want to sort of like, as you do, a bit of a push here or there. Maybe it's got a little bit cushy. He might turn out to be the person who's 50-year-old and still living at home and never moved out and still playing a PlayStation and still eating nachos and drinking Coca-Cola all day and sort of going on these websites and looking for these sort of conspiracies, and this could happen. So I sort of cut a long story short and said, what do you think we should do? I said, well, based on the evidence so far and what you've presented with me and everything that you've managed to do, if what you've done is correct and this is the protocols you've took into consideration, there's probably one thing you can do is buy a bag of fireworks. And well, why would you do that? I said, well, get it up his backside and do something here. Because he's in his mid-20s now and basically, okay, you're running a bar for him in the evening, you're down making him breakfast, it's damn too cushy here. There's no actualisation, there's no motivation. These primal drives are all being met. He goes on Friday night, Friday night he'd be out there and he'd meet that need and he'd meet the needs of, thirst and hunger. These primal hypothalamus motivational drives are all being met. But if you sort of go up the hierarchy, he kind of sort of got stuck in that situation. That's not undermining. Obviously there was something that sort of, at a deep level, but equally I don't think the environment he was in was quite conducive. And for all the will in the world, he was wonderful parents. You would not get nicer people anywhere in the world. Wonderful people, really, really heart of gold. They wanted the best for him. But you might want the best for someone, but in wanting the best for someone, you can actually be making it harder for them. Because if you start doing things for people that they can do for themselves, what happens? They don't damn get anywhere. You're going to be tying you tie. At what point do you stop tying your children's shoelaces and come back to your 20-year-old and tie my shoelace type thing? At what point do you stop doing things that they can do themselves? So there's a point, okay, if you let people do what they can do for themselves, they can have some dignity as well. And that's always been a big thing in my philosophy. If they can do it themselves, then do it themselves. So you've got a 6-year-old in car who can put the seatbelt on himself. You put the seatbelt on. Now you put it on for him, and you put the seatbelt on. And that might sound harsh, but if you sort of take that to another level, okay, if you do things for people they can do for themselves, what ends up happening? So the point being they don't learn to do it for themselves. So cutting a long story short, because I want to move on, and we sort of reflect on the environment. And from all accounts, all those years ago, we turned things around, I think. At least at the point that I last kept in touch. But that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is that, okay, there are factors that contribute towards people and the environment certainly contribute towards people and their motivation to evolve. And some of the things I've mentioned there, you could almost say a contradiction to some of the, to Maslow in one sense, to a certain point. But equally in saying that, we look at Maslow's theory of psychology. In psychology, in 1943, he studied people like Albert Einstein and Eleanor Roosevelt, Maslow. Okay, he had a humanistic approach, and that was developed in psychology as a rebellion to what some psychologists saw as limitations of behaviourists, limitations of psychodynamic. Okay, the humanistic felt that, it's the third force in psychology. After psychoanalysis and behaviorism, Maslow, it was more humanistic. It was, okay, it rejected the assumptions of the behaviorist perspective. It rejected the assumption of the psychodynamic approach. One example is that psychodynamic approach, for example, our behaviour and feelings as adults, including psychological problems, are rooted in childhood experiences. So, okay, the child is fathered to the man. If you believe it, it's true. But we know now, ironically, from an epigenetic point of view, that actually, childhood experiences do influence. So maybe Freud, in all of his infinite wisdom, was a hell of a lot cleverer than a lot of people give him credit for. So, okay, people might not buy into psychodynamic anymore, albeit it still exists in a short variation, but maybe he had a point. I don't know, but that's another story for another day. But where Maslow came in, he's hypothesized, and before he passed away, he was working on another stage, which we sort of won't draw too much attention to at this point, but he talked more about the 5 stages of human needs that motivate our behaviour. Okay? So he's a humanistic psychologist. About humanistic is free will. Okay, so it's a change from psychoanalysis. It was a change from being chained, from a behaviourist point of view. Okay, you could grow and change. You could evolve. Individuals have free will. We could change. We could develop in the right environment. Our highest potential. We could actualise in the right environment. So the primary difference between Freud and humanism was Freud's theory was deterministic. So I suppose in one sense it's a pretty nice change. If you're told all your life, well actually you know what, there are factors that determine the way your life's going to go, which we know there is, and you can't do a great deal about that to a certain point, it's kind of liberating to think, yeah, you know, great, actually I have got some free will to a point. Now, we know now with certain studies it's become interesting again in parts of the brain, which we don't have time to go into in this lecture, but we will do throughout the course. It's quite fascinating. Some of the temporal studies that have been done between free will and activation I find quite fascinating, and I will sort of show you some evidence on the course. It's really interesting stuff. But another story for another day. But his theory says behaviour is determined by unconscious desires. Deterministic this is. And individuals are not all people. So the humanistic theory isn't, and the Freud unconscious, by the way, isn't the unconscious that we talk about in the hypnosis. It's like a dustbin, the Freud unconscious. That's the sort of difference. His unconscious is sort of the dustbin for all things being, you know, whatever, you know, the id, the ego, the sexual fantasies and so on and so forth, all the things that you sort of come up with and so on and so forth. But I suppose the point being is that humanistic is more opposed to sort of consciously can change. I can consciously change. Humanism said people are inherently good. We're self-motivated to improve. We want ways to improve because we want to reach self-actualization. We want to improve. We just need the right environment to improve. So the third force in psychology after psychoanalysis and behaviorism. And Maslow created the model, the model of needs. Rogers and Maslow has placed little value on scientific psychology, especially the use of psychological laboratory to investigate both animal and human behaviour. So they didn't see the value in that. They debated that. Okay, but equally there was debate against what they were doing, about the scientific value of what they did. But all things said and done, with sort of a brief insight into behaviourism. The behaviourism movement began in 1913, and that starts with Watson. So prior to Pavlov, you had Pavlov. You've come across the classical conditioning stimulus. Everyone come across that before? The Pavlov dog experiments, where what he would do is sort of ring the bell. Okay, he'd ring the bell, so the food was unconditioned response, because the dog would salivate. The bell was neutral, but you put the two together, what happens? Conditioned response. So that was the explanation around behaviour to a point. Okay, and then they did the Watson little Albert experiments. You've probably come across them before. If you haven't, you wouldn't do the experiment now because it wouldn't be ethical scientifically. But what they did is they got the sodium little Albert was his name. It was a baby with no known fears, only other than I think falling and loud noises. But anyway, the point being is that it didn't have any. So what they did is they took classical conditioning a bit further, and what they did is they got little Albert at 9 months old to hold I think it was a white rat, sorry, yeah. And basically he would hold it, but they would do a big loud noise behind him. And actually, you know what happened? He became afraid of not just the rat, but anything that resembled that. So that was the explanation around behaviour.
I've had a dog behaviourist do something like that to my dog before.
Yeah, well, I don't recommend to do the experiment, by the way. But, I mean, the point being is that the value in the experiments was, okay, all loud noises were considered unconditioned stimulus. Little Albert didn't need to learn to be afraid. He was afraid. Just like the dogs would salivate, he was afraid anything that resembled the rat. So, he associated neutral rat with negative loud noise. He built an association there. I mentioned yesterday about the young girl I was working with in care. The member of staff comes in, asks her to make her a coffee, claps, does that with his hands, and she associates that to her abuser and got up and started striking him. Okay? So, he had nothing to do with what had happened. He was a member of staff, but she built an association there for whatever reasons. But so we got conditioned response. So Albert's fear of rats was a conditioned response. Even though he wasn't afraid of rats initially, he learnt by associating rats with loud noises. That was the condition. And as behaviourists, sort of going forward, getting to the model, it's a bit of an insight building up to humanism. Skinner took classic conditioning one step further, operant conditioning. Okay, so Skinner was the father of operant conditioning. He was the most famous for conducting experiments with animals, and he could get these rats in laboratories to do almost anything, so to speak. But the point being is psychology should be studied through a more objective lens, with hard evidence, observation and experimentation. So Skinner's famous for changing through reinforcement or punishment, which is given after desired response, motivation. So, he'd do his positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement with the pigeons, so to speak, and the rats he did and he would use to create reinforcement. At the time, conditioning, classical conditioning, was the timing of the voluntary response. So he took it one step further, but all things said and done, and moving forward now, the potential for classical operant conditioning told to human behaviour was evident from the outset of behaviour. Behaviourism, they sort of demonstrated how behaviour, from a point of view of conditioning and altering behaviour, that sort of laid the groundwork there. And Skinner sought operant methods to change and to treat emotional disturbances, using positive and negative reinforcers to humanly increase frequency of a positively desired behaviours to reduce the negative behaviour. So all behaviour is learned from the environment, in a nutshell, from that point of view. So now we know that actually, the environment plays a part, but our genes play a part too. So behaviourism said that psychology should be seen as a science. They were firm believers in science, observable behaviours opposed to internal events like thinking and emotion. There's little evidence or difference between the learning that takes place in humans and those of animals. But we know now there are differences. But at that point, they didn't respond. So behaviour is a result of stimulus response. So in a way, when you look at that, you think, it's quite disheartening, really, isn't it, to a point? You kind of think, well, actually, that's it. What do I do? How do I change? The humanistic theory was great because you had these great minds saying, well, not all behaviour is determined. You got free will. It's a damn nice thing to think, it's a really nice place to be. All individuals are unique and motivated to achieve their potential. Well, is that true? I don't know. But it is with some people, and a lot of people. A proper understanding of human behaviour can only be achieved by studying humans, not animals. That was their take. Okay? They saw limitations. Psychology should be individual, ideographic, rather than the average performance of groups. So determined theories that all human action is caused entirely by preceding events and not by free will. Probably not a nice place to be. But what Maslow did was develop a hierarchy of human needs. And you see these needs, and they filter their way across academia and business and many different areas and avenues to understand human needs, which have been transferred across sectors. Some needs the priority over other needs, though we all have the ability to grow and go through the gears. Growth is intimate, it's part of the human collective, unless barriers get in the way and circumstance prevail. Barriers. If barriers get in the way, so you could plant a tree, and if it's nurtured and watered, it's going to grow. But if the seeds are eaten by birds, if the weather, there's a flood, it's not going to realise its potential. So he's all about creating the right circumstances to grow. Okay, and those of you who are young people will probably have an awareness of how this is filtered into that environment, because you know what, you're hardly going to damn worry about a maths exam if you haven't eaten. So, you know, it's a good place to start. So in life we've got challenges from birth, genetic, biology, psychology, social experiences, circumstances. We talked about psychodynamic. Your fate is destined. You're limited to who you can become. So humanism was nice in the sense that you learn from experience, you grow through self-awareness. You can change the situation. You can change. And we'll look at the pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, okay, you got psychological needs, survival needs, what behaviours would class as primary reinforcers. So behaviours would class as primary reinforcers. They have food, water, basic shelter. So that's your first port of call. Okay, food, water, basic shelter. Where we begin with that? The bottom of the pyramid. That's where we sort of begin. If you haven't got food, water, basic shelter, how are you going to flourish? Okay. The next level is safety. Okay. Think of the film. Who's ever seen the film Castaway? Okay. If you haven't seen the film Castaway, I suggest you rush and see it tonight. No. To cut a long story short, Castaway is a great advertisement for, I think, the football. What is it? What's that football? The Wilson football. But Castaway, it stars Tom Hanks, and basically, he crashes in a plane, and he's on this island, and all the people in the plane, the two or three of them, I think his co-pilot passed away. He was on his own, in this island. On his own on the island, okay, on his absolute own. Not a good place to be on your own, on an island, but some people might suggest otherwise. But the point being, he got that bored that he got a ball and drew a face on it and started talking to it. But the key thing is that what does he do? Safety. The first thing he looks for is survival needs. He learns to hunt, water. He's on this island, castaway, basic shelter. And then what does he do after that? The next level is safety. Okay, he builds himself a place to live. He doesn't need to lock the doors because there's no one around, but you might want to lock the doors at home to keep yourself safe. But the point being, he protects himself from the elements. Okay, because the island is prone to variable weather. There's storms, there's stuff that goes on there. So he sort of protects himself from that. But that's where he is, that next level up. That's key. Okay? So, from the point of view, you transfer this model across to school and therapy, coaching, or business. Well, the reality is that you want to feel safe. So, to actualize, your clients want to feel safe. You want clients want to be in a situation where they feel safe, just like you want to feel safe when you go to sleep at night, you lock the doors. So the next level up is safety. You all live in a structure, a roof over your head. But the point being is that when you've got that, and you actualize that, according to Maslow, then you go to the next need. Okay, so just to reiterate, you've got your food, your water, your basic shelter. Okay, you actualize that. Maslow would say then the next level, the motivation is to sort of safety. So you got shelter, but you want to feel safe around the people. So you're probably not going to go down and hang around that dodgy part of town. You probably sort of stay in that part of town you feel safe in. You might not wander around that sort of town. You might not put yourself in situations where you're vulnerable. You might decide, well, actually, it's not a good idea to sort of go to that pub where a fight breaks out every that'll get your hypothalamus, that'll get your amygdala ringing. So you lock your doors at night. Okay? Maybe some of you can remember the days that you didn't lock your doors. We lock our doors now. But the point being is that the stage is belongingness, love and belongingness. So you've got a full stomach, you're eating well, you're meeting your psychological needs, you're safe, secure. According to Maslow, the next level up is love and belongingness. Okay, you want to belong to something. Okay, you want to be a part of something. And to a point, you could argue that human beings are quite tribal in one sense. And I suppose if you go back to, going off piece a little bit, if you go back to the very beginning, in tribes, your best chance to survive was in a tribe. Because if you went out alone, what chance would you have? Not a good chance. And that's why you see people kind of form these sort of groups and clusters, don't they? Because ultimately, in the end, you get ostracized, you're out there, you're vulnerable to the other tribe, to other people. So inherently, we kind of bond. And you could argue that, okay, from an evolution point of view, there's a time when if you got banished from the tribe, you're in trouble. And what do? Your best chance to be around people. So love and belongingness, it ties into that. You love and belongingness. You're part of something, community, club, family, social group. Okay? Does that resonate with everybody? You become part of community, the local club, you got your family there, social group. Okay, so you meet all these needs, and you're motivated now to move to the next level. Esteem needs. So assuming you got a place to eat, safe place, belong to a group, you love and you're loved, and all these esteem needs are met, you actualize that, and then you sort of move to another. You feel good about yourself. Now, why do you do what you do? Work-wise, why do people do things? You esteem. Why do people, you see, why do people do certain things they do to feel good about themselves too? I mean, how you do it is entirely up to you. But you might decide, well, actually, you know what? There's a homeless person. I'll give him, who is living on the street. I'll give him £10 to buy something to eat. But you decide to put it on Facebook, so you get 100 damn likes. So you could have kept it to yourself and made an esteem. If you decide, well, I get a bit more esteem, I may as well mention it. And you'll do it in a certain way that's kind of indirect. Yeah, I bumped into this homeless. Well, if you're damn, but that's the way we roll. To meet our esteem needs, and you go home after passing the exam, and you get a promotion at work, and it's part of what we are, part of our makeup. Okay, so assuming all things are going well, and very few people, Maslow would say, moving to that sort of next level, all things being met, you're in that pinnacle part of self-actualization. Okay, you unleash the force within. What's been latent. Okay, you peeled away the circumstance that kept the person you could be in the cupboard. The genie's out of the bottle. Bang. You're out there. All the barriers are gone. You fulfill your needs. You grow into this sort of self-actualization. One thing to sort of bear in mind, by the way, before Maslow passed away, he moved one step further. He did suggest, according to literature, that once you fulfill physiological safety, love, belongingness, esteem, actualization, that's not enough. We look outside ourselves to give back. And think about those sort of entrepreneurs who make it, who do really, really well, sort of go through the gears. What do? So yeah, they want to give back, don't they? They look outside themselves. What can I do? Can I help people in certain places around the world? Can I give my money away? Not me, because I don't have any money, but the people who've got. But we find ways to give. But it doesn't mean just money. With philanthropy. So, okay, I decide personally I like to go and do talks in schools. I think I've got some value, and sometimes I'll do a talk at a school and I won't ask for anything for it, because at the time paper trail or getting any funding would take forever. So you go in there and think, as you do, so you like to give outside. You like to outside yourself, as one does, to get fulfillment. Okay? So that's not to say, by the way, that you can't go back to a stage. I think it's really important to know that with any stage model, you can sort of fluctuate. And what I mean by that is we can be in any stage simultaneously. So you're not just fixed in one stage. And let me give you an example. Let's say your company let's say, for example, you've got this company that's sort of doing really, really well. Really nice business for yourself. You've got food, shelter. Okay. You sort of worked your way through the gears, this esteem, actualization, you're giving back, wonderful company, then you go bankrupt, okay? You're out there, you've got this company that's flying, this training company out in Jamaica. You do really, really well. You invite me over as a guest speaker, and then it goes horribly wrong.
Expenses paid.
I was doing well until you invited him. Okay, and then you go bankrupt and you got no money, and that's not going to suggest that, okay, you know, not to say your family won't love you no more and your peers, but your priority changes. You're going to think more about actualization. You're not going to think about actualization, you're going to think about survival. Well, all of a sudden, you've got, you know, bills that need to be paid. The creditors, we're going to evict you. You're going to be forced out of your home. Well, you're hardly going to think, how can I actualize myself? At that point, you just go back to survival. So you go all the way back to food, shelter, full stomach, a roof over your head. You're not going to be sitting down first thing in the morning and picking up one of those sort of spiritual books and think, great, I'll read The Power of Now this morning. And no, you're going to pick up the damn job section and get a damn job, one would think. Does that sort of make sense? So you can go back. So, you know, Castaway, Tom Hanks, when he sort of crashed the plane, okay, prior to crashing the plane, on his mind was to get the job done. He was a courier in this plane. He was going to go back and he was engaged and marry his fiancée and start a family, and he sort of had it all mapped out. You know, the plane goes down, that goes out the window. He's back to survival. He's back to, how am I going to catch fish? Trying to build a spear, and the storm comes in, and all these sort of weird and wonderful things happen while he's on the island. It's not until he gets back off the island and sort of somehow he gets rescued that, you know, the actualization from one level sort of begins again. But that's not a story for another day. But your priority is going to take precedent, okay, which is useful. Based on, you readjust your life. You readjust your life. But once you fulfill each need, you work your way through the gears. But there's no reason why in a stage one you can't sort of bounce from one to the other and be in various things simultaneously in order of priority. See, the pinnacle is once you satisfied your own needs, once you satisfy your own needs, what you did is not enough to be the best you could be, and then you decide you're going to make a difference in other people's lives. You become the best you can be. You become the very best you can be, and you feel, well, now I want to help other people be the best they can be. And you've got to wonder, sometimes you look at people like, say, you know, we talked about Tony Robbins yesterday, and whatever anyone thinks of him, he doesn't need to be doing what he's doing now. You know, he probably owns the island that Tom has cast away on. He's Fijian island there, but he doesn't need to do it anymore, does he? I mean, you know, let's face it. I mean, the reality is he could sort of kick back if he wanted to. He can do plenty of things, but he does what he does. And you can sort of see that actualization process where, okay, I'm going to help people. You could argue, why is he charged for? Well, the point being that, you know, it's his model of business. He's got to pay people as well. Plus, you could argue people don't pay for what he does, they might not value it too. You know, so he could be a crusader and do it for nothing, but I'm sure he's got his reasons, but he's got to pay staff too. But the point being is that that's all irrelevant, but he's still doing what he does. And many people do. Why are they still working for? Well, who knows? Maybe that comes into it. Some of the philanthropists, I don't know what their agenda is, because I don't know them personally, but you've got to sort of wonder from outside looking in, this person sort of got to the very top of their career. You know, I certainly know plenty of sports people, business people. They go around doing talks. They don't need to do it. They don't get paid anywhere near they used to do doing what they did before. They go different paid work if they wanted to. They choose that.
Well, physiology, the wires for it, aren't they? Because that area of the brain that lights up when you actually give back is the same almost for addiction as well, isn't it? So
Absolutely. You know, there is research that suggests that. Absolutely. And you know, the dopamine in addiction. In some people anyway, there's the scientific evidence now. But yeah, I mean, you know, that dopamine, and you could link it to science, to that point. I don't think at the point as when Maslow sort of come up with this, he had the equipment we have now to do the research. But you are right, there are correlations there, absolutely. You know, but equally, Dawn, the other thing to think about would be, okay, if you've just been laid off and you know, you ain't got no work, then you probably won't get that dopamine kick in helping someone else until you sort yourself out, one would think. Would you not think? Say, all of a sudden, if you're facing eviction yourself, you know, if you're sort of facing living on the street, Yeah.
Although we're thinking now about when you look at things
Well,
like...
there's not many people like you. Maybe you're wired differently.
No, but like,
Yeah.
like gift giving, so if you look
Yeah.
at proportionate,
Absolutely, yeah.
people with less money and less in life,
Yes.
do far more.
Yeah, and
charity.
I think you're right, and it's hard to quantify that because people say, well, what's 50 grand for football, or what's this for whatever, what's 300 grand? I think it's hard to quantify proportion. Okay, £20 to us might be, how you quantify that more in the scheme of things for somebody else, less for somebody else. But I take your point in one sense, but the bottom line would be, okay, let's say, you face bankruptcy and you face eviction, you're probably going to prioritise before you do anything else in getting yourself back on your feet. If you don't, then you're going to find it hard, and you get in a situation where, okay, you dive into a pool and you're trying to save someone who can't swim and you can't damn swim either. Ultimately in the end, you got £20 in your pocket to feed yourself and your family. I mean, let's be realistic here. If you've got £20 in your pocket to feed yourself and your family, are you going to give it away? Well, probably not. There's a good chance you're going to look after yourself and your family first, if we're honest, in the way the world runs. But the reality is, it's not saying you can't help anybody else, but our priority takes precedent, and that's sort of where this comes into it. But
there's links between the self-actualisation and the mission and purpose in terms of logical levels as well, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's correlations with a lot of models, and some of these thinkers, and you've got anthropologists, you've got people who've come up with ideas, and there's correlations with a lot of variable models for sure, absolutely.
I'm also thinking you've got people as well, haven't you, some really deprived communities that I work in,
yes,
where they've got absolutely nothing, and yet they will still be volunteering to set up youth clubs.
yes. But they've got nothing compared to who, Dawn. They've got nothing compared. I mean, we could then go away and say, well, actually, we live in a great society. We live in a great country, by the way. Whatever anybody says, this is a fantastic country because we have the opportunity to actualise ourselves. That's why people want to come here and to our society, because they can be actualised. Because you know what? There's some places around the world you won't get past base 1. It's damn tough to get there. It really is. And the poorest in our society, for the greater good, and that's undermining them, because I've been there myself too, but you could argue that, okay, the poorest in our society, whilst it's not good, to a point, most people have got a roof over their head and eat and have food. Well, many people do. I mean,
I'm thinking now, there's people that I know and I'm working with who have food banks, and yet they're still...
Well, they've got food banks, yeah.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying about the...
That's not saying it's right, Dawn. I'm not saying it's right, by the way. I'm not saying that one person isn't one person too many. But certainly in my experience, when I used to work in, care homes and projects like that, even the people who lived in sort of the poorest places in society, some of them had Sky TV. Okay, it wasn't legal, but some had that. They had food, they had shelter. It wasn't anywhere like it is in certain areas around the world, where they don't have anything. Let's be a reality check. Let's send people on the plane 4 hours away, where they get a reality check and think, and they had an opportunity. You've got an education system that you can go. You don't pay for education. Oh, you pay, I suppose, from a tax point of view, but the point being, you've got the option. You can do it. You can educate, you can go to university. Whatever you think of university, you can go. Okay, you can pay it back eventually. Whether you agree with that or not is a different point, but the fact that you can do it, the option is there. The safety net is there. See, welfare is a safety net we have. Okay, which obviously is up for abuse, and it can be, but what's the lesser of two evils? Do you have something, okay, that could be abused, but for the most part, I think most people use it to get back on their feet. You make a perfectly valid point, absolutely, and I think...
I think, as I'm saying, I'm just intrigued that the idea of dopamine and the actual...
Yes.
Because some of the people I'm talking about really don't have very much at all, and it's still giving back, so I'm actually intrigued...
It is a possibility.
Within that scale.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whether the jumping bits...
No stage model is perfect, by the way, and no stage model, but it doesn't need to be perfect to be useful. So I think that's the key with all of it, and no model, whether you use the 6 human needs, the logical level, any stage model, and none, there's no perfection. Each individual is different, so to speak, and that's probably one of the limitations of a model like this, because every person is different, every soul on earth is different. And then you could argue, okay, why does a nurse get paid so much and a footballer gets paid so much? Well, a nurse creates more value in society to a point. From an entertainment point of view, the market value provides the football. with the wage. So, you know, who's going to knock back what you get? You train all your life, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but they're paid in accordance to the market value. They generate the revenue. You pay your Sky subscription, or your BT, you go watch and play, like an actor or an actress, or whatever you want to call it, the money's there. And they get it, they provide entertainment. You know, a nurse has more value, you could argue, but the bottom line is we live in that sort of society, you know, call it capitalism. That's probably one of the pitfalls. But what do? Do we sort of go back to a socialist society? And that's not damn good, because equally in saying that, you know, we've seen the pitfalls of that. You know, and you look at, you know, you've got to get a balance. You know, certain societies around the world that adopted these policies. It didn't do too good for, you know, the likes of the Soviets, the Russian society for many years, all the stuff that went on there in China and the stuff around the world. So, okay, it's a nice sentiment to have, but in reality, it's hard to get the damn balance, you know. But I certainly think with these sort of things here, they're quite fascinating, and you can just as we break for lunch, I'm mindful of your basic needs for food before you start getting angry and aggressive at me and attacking me. I want you to think about reflecting about how this model can fit in to business, school, and life, in your own life, in your own family, in your own schools, in your own business. You know, great people doing some great work, like the likes of Dawn, and many of you doing some fantastic work. How you can sort of transfer some of this component and think, okay, how can I help people actualize? Because I'm thinking actualization. I'm thinking if I'm sort of working in a school, I'm working in a football club, I'm thinking, okay, actualization. So why do I promote education very heavily? Recently I've been sort of covering, teaching, lecturing a couple of days a week, some football scholars at a professional football club for somebody else. And some of them have hung all their hopes on being a professional footballer, but only somebody can make it. And they're coming towards the end of the decision making, and some of them are likely to sort of jack in their course if they don't make it, or they insinuate they're going to do that. And I'm like, no, do your education, you're going to grow. But obviously they're, from this perspective, seeing things differently to what I'm seeing, but I'm suggesting you've still got your food, your shelter, your water, you've still got all that anyway. But do your education, because it's going to come in handy at some point. If not, as an entry to university, to further growth, to maybe get a scholarship in America, it's going to help you as an individual. Education, education, education. Learn. You know, keep going. And that's sort of reflecting on the model, thinking, okay, you can learn. You can sort of go through the gig. It'll do you all the good in a practical way. So we can take a moment before we break for lunch, and you can reflect on what you're going to eat to meet those first needs. Just think for a moment, okay, how, and we're sort of after break going to do some other work as well, but equally, you know, you can have one eye on such model, and it can explain a lot. Okay, so, you know, in an environment where, you know, Dawn mentioned very kindly before about a certain environment. So, okay, if they're not meeting, they've got the safety, the food, the shelter, okay, they're not hardly going to be interested in precisely.
Yeah, depression's a good example of that. So somebody that may have been high performing has gone right down to a depressed state. They're just thinking, in fact, they're not even bothered about eating in some cases.
Well, possibility, yeah, I mean, that could be a correlation from a humanistic point of view. There's other factors that contribute towards that, but the point being is that, okay, can I provide people in my environment? Can I provide people who come to see me as a coach, a therapist, an environment where they can actualize and grow and be the best they can be? Can I, if I'm working in the football club, provide an environment for the players to grow as human beings, as well as become the best they can be as performers? Can I provide in my business environment to give an example very briefly before we break away? When I used to work in care homes and education, okay, there were independent schools that were set up as well. And one of the things I suggested we do was provide breakfast for the young people. And it was met with reservation, because someone was saying, well, actually, if you do that, they won't eat at home and I'll come and eat here. But I, you know, took your point on board, Dawn, in the sense that some of them didn't have, or weren't meeting that need at home. And I was like, okay, you've got to go in for a lecture at 9:30, a teaching at 9:30. Well, you're not going to do very well with an empty stomach. So the least we could do was sort of provide them with sort of a breakfast club. And retention and attainment shot up. If nothing else, they were coming in to eat. But you did see a shift. You know, they had, and you could argue that food provided that sort of dopamine as well to a point. But the point being is they had a full stomach. They'd eaten, you know, because some of them didn't eat. They didn't have breakfast. They didn't have any of that. And you're hardly going to worry about maths and English and science and physics and whatever else you've got, or PE even, on an empty stomach. And it made a big, big change. It really did. And I thought, we'll do the breakfast club, and that'll be a good idea. We can sort of get them to cook themselves and integrate that with key skills and home economic, and they can learn to cook themselves, key skills, and that. It was really, really nice, really, really pleasant. It gave them ownership of the thing in hand. It was really, really, really nice. And by doing that, I had this in mind. I thought, well, actually, if we're going to help these people, the young people actualise, then let's start with making sure they got food and the basic needs are being met best we can for our day. And obviously beyond that, there's very little we can do. But we can then sort of introduce them to, you know, the other aspects of the model actualization through academia, through activities, through certain things. And we can sort of maybe push them along the way to start thinking about giving back. We probably aren't going to get anywhere near that in time we've got to work with them where they are, but we can give it a good go and see what happens. And I've always had this belief, it takes one person to break the cycle, the damn cycle. One person, all it takes, one person breaks the cycle, comes back, and then one becomes 2, 3, 5, and you're on the way. One person goes away, makes something of themselves, if you want to put it that way, and they come back and shed some light, and everybody else thinks, well, if he's done it, she's done it, then maybe I can do it too. And when I say make it, I'm not just saying be a big sports star, be a pop star, be whatever. I'm just saying have an adaptive life. And you've got to gauge where the person is, by the way, to where they're going. You know, you've got to think, well, actually, where this person is to begin with and what's their baseline. You know, that is relevant too, because some people start, it's like, you know, I suppose, to close on this note, some people start the race well behind everybody else. So if in the beginning you're 100 metres, if we're going to race 500 metres, by the way, and you're starting 100 metres in front of me, I've got a damn hard way to catch up to you. And the reality is that's what happens in society. Some people are brought up in a world where they are and face challenges, genetically and environmentally. Okay, and it's just the way it is. It's not fair, but life isn't damn fair. It's just life. It's not fair. You don't make the rules, you just do the best you've got, the cards you've got. And you start 100 metres behind, you're on your own race. You might overhaul the person in front of you, you might never overhaul them. They might always get the better opportunities through nothing else other than they've won the genetic lottery, or just the lottery in terms of, okay, born into an environment or a world that has more opportunity. But we can all do the best we can with what we've got. And that is success in my mind. So if we break for lunch till 1:30, is that okay for everybody?
Yep.
So some lunch.